Recently, I made a video attempting to diagnose every disease in Skyrim. Because of its surprise popularity and this content well hasn't run dry yet, I thought I would do another video where I diagnose the rest of the diseases in Skyrim. The first time around, I did each disease in the base game, plus one of the DLC, and that, for a time, was every disease in Skyrim. That is, until the release of Skyrim Anniversary Edition, a souped-up re-release of the base game that added a ton of additional content, like new armors, quests, houses, and a whole new way to play the game, Survival Mode. Survival Mode is a challenging new difficulty added to the game that brings in new mechanics, like hunger, exposure to cold, and a handful of new diseases and afflictions. Just like last time, I want to see if we can use the information given to us in-game to diagnose what real-world sickness each of these fictional ailments would be. In my last video that I have linked below, I laid out my method for diagnosing each disease, identify the disease source, see the effects of the disease in-game, translate those into real-world side effects, and research to see if we can find a real disease with the right symptoms and source that we're looking for. Without further ado, let's jump into a recap of what we already know. Ataxia is the only disease in Skyrim that shares a name with one in reality. It's basically, you get poisoned by something, and now, oops, you can't steal things as easy. I said bone break fever was an infection from a broken bone. However, some of the comments suggested it could also be dengue fever, with its nickname being the bone-breaking fever. You choose which one you like better, they both do the same in Skyrim terms. I just chose the one that came from a bear and not a mosquito. Brain rot is West Nile virus. You get it from a bird woman in game, you get it from birds which can be women in real life. It makes sense to me. Droops is a disease you get from fungal-infected grasshoppers that I said was summit disease. Imagine it's a way less effective version of the cordyceps fungus from the Last of Us series, but instead of turning you into a zombie, it just makes you droopy and uncoordinated. Rattles is a secondary condition of Lyme disease called Lyme neuroborreliosis. It's also my least favorite disease in the game because it comes from Charis. And I hate Charis. And you should hate Charis too. Now, I said rock joint was septic arthritis. However, a lot of the comments said it was actually tetanus. Now, in retrospect, does that seem like it could be the correct answer? Yes. However, do I want to admit to the YouTube comments I was wrong? Never. Whitbane is toxoplasmosis, a disease you get from a parasite that lives in cat poop. Writer's note, insert a reason to show my cat here. Sure. Lastly, sanguinaire vampirus, also known as the disease that turns you into a vampire, has some magical elements, but at its core, it is undoubtedly porphyria. After that recap, you can see what Skyrim calls a disease isn't the same as what we call a disease in real life. Skyrim diseases can be anything from a fungus, a bacteria, a virus, or a genetic disorder. If it's something you go to the doctor for that won't go away by itself, we're going to call it a disease for the sake of simplicity, since that's what Skyrim does. Now, let's lay out our new diseases here. Survival Mode adds 4 new diseases, 3 new debuffs called afflictions, and I've added a special surprise sickness I'll be diagnosing at the end. I'll be going through each disease in the order of least to most complex. To start, I'm going to run through each of the afflictions added in Survival Mode. Afflictions are a separate class of debuffs from diseases, but they're on the same wiki page, so I thought I would include them here anyways. The difference between a disease and an affliction, besides their spelling obviously, is diseases come from a specific source, like a creature, a trap, or a blood fountain, and last until cured by something like a potion. Afflictions, meanwhile, are temporary conditions that arise from certain needs not being met that go away over time. The 3 afflictions are addled, which causes a lower rate of stamina and magic regeneration if you don't get enough sleep, frostbitten, which makes lockpicking harder and lessens bow damage when overexposed to the cold, and weakened, which makes melee attacks and blocking less effective if you haven't eaten enough. All these conditions are exactly what they sound like. Addled is sleep deprivation, weakened means you're starving, and frostbitten is itself. There's nothing to really diagnose with the afflictions, but I wanted to comment on the minor ways they hinder you, which help differentiate them from the diseases. The greater difficulty lockpicking and bow shooting are a unique way to express the cold's adverse effect on your finger dexterity. We covered before that magic is linked to the mind, so being sluggish in mind and body is exactly what sleep deprivation feels like, and not having anything to eat would obviously make you weaker. They're nothing groundbreaking, but still fun set dressing that makes sense for what they represent and how they affect the player. Now, we go into the proper diseases, starting with food poisoning. Food poisoning, as you already know, is a disease that exists in real life that's not uncommon to have experienced. Its commonality is in large part due to its source in reality and in Skyrim being, believe it or not, food. Ingesting harmful chemicals, undercooked meats, or any myriad of microscopic menaces are all reasons to have contracted food poisoning. Eating raw food specifically is how you contract it in Skyrim. Oddly enough, this is the only disease you can get from raw food, as every other Skyrim disease comes from one of the other sources I said earlier. The effects in-game are a 50% decrease to your stamina and magic regeneration speeds, similar to the adult affliction, and food no longer restores your health for 3 days. Food poisoning's IRL symptoms include stomach pains, vomiting, a fever, and headaches, all lasting multiple days before subsiding. I don't know about you, but those symptoms sound pretty similar between real life and Skyrim, so good job Skyrim devs. Gold star for an accurate portrayal of food poisoning. One more thing I'd like to say about food poisoning that makes it unique is it's the only disease that any race in Skyrim is immune to. Neither Khajiit nor Argonians can contract the disease, which makes sense from a biological standpoint. Khajiit are obviously based off of various species of felines, animals well known for hunting down live prey and consuming their flesh raw. Meanwhile, the amphibious Argonians have a natural resistance to disease due to their homeland of the Black Marsh being a perfect breeding ground for all kinds of illnesses. Their bestial physiologies give them an evolutionary advantage when it comes to preventing food poisoning, and I think their immunity was a nice detail to add to the game. Now, we dive deeply into diagnosing the disease dutifully dispensed by Draugr, brown rot. As mentioned in my alliteration, brown rot is a disease you can only contract through Draugr, and the symptoms of the disease are lessened effectiveness of heavy and light armor, and you feel less well rested after a full night's sleep. Now, one thing I want to say about brown rot is it's not to be confused with the similarly sounding disease I diagnosed in my last video as West Nile virus, brain rot, because I confused the two of them. I didn't realize I had accidentally put the symptoms for brain rot in the brown rot column of my big disease research spreadsheet until after I'd already written, recorded, and edited all the footage. In my original cut of the video, I diagnosed brown rot as necrotizing fasciitis. Necrotizing fasciitis is a flesh-eating bacteria that has had documented cases of being contracted from a dead body through cuts and wounds, or in Skyrim's case, a dead body that's giving you cuts and wounds. It also changes the color of your skin to make it look brown and rotten. I am not showing uncensored proof here because, gross. I think having a flesh-eating bacteria cover your skin would be a good reason for armor not to be as effective since the thing it's covering up is so much more squishy and weak, and you wouldn't really be able to sleep if, your skin is falling off. Now, I 100% think that necrotizing fasciitis and brown rot are one and the same, but I wanted to take a minute to highlight a few comments from my last video that had their own theories on what the disease could be. One commenter, Keels829, suggested a couple different options for what they thought brown rot could be. One of them being necrotizing fasciitis, like what I thought, but another being some sort of supernatural fungus, which actually has some similarities to reality. That's because in reality, there is a fungus called brown rot. However, brown rot only affects fruits and doesn't come from axe-wielding zombies. So unless the player is secretly a giant peach, I don't think that's what brown rot actually is in real life, but it's still a fun idea to think of. The other theory that really caught my attention was from Miku Jess, who suggested that brown rot might not be a disease, but a specific form of PTSD that comes from fighting Draugr, who themselves are brown and rotten. I also don't think this is what brown rot is because Skyrim diseases tend to be named after how they physically manifest themselves in the infected, but I really like it from a narrative standpoint. The idea brown rot's name is due to the undead being so terrifying to the player character that the brown, rotten bodies of Draugr are seared into the Dragonborn's nightmares is such a cool storytelling concept. So I say take your pick of which diagnosis you like best. A flesh-eating bacteria, a maybe magic mushroom, or a form of PTSD. And if you have differing theories on this disease or any of the others, be sure to leave a comment below as we move on to the next one. Next up is gutworm. A disease I thought I could diagnose immediately, but it got complicated quick. If you're the same as me, you heard gutworm and thought, oh, that's probably a tapeworm. That's a worm in your guts. And the effects of gutworm are a slowed stamina regeneration speed and food restoring less hunger. Sounds exactly like the symptoms of something living in your guts, eating your dinner, and making you tired. Case closed, right? Oh, I wish. In reality, you get helminths, the term for parasitic worms like tapeworms, hookworms, and pinworms, by eating uncooked meat with their eggs inside. Earlier, I said the only disease you get in Skyrim by eating anything is food poisoning. So how do you contract gutworm if not by eating something? Trolls. It's trolls. Not eating trolls, just trolls. These apish triclopses can take one swipe at the player and somehow give them an intestinal parasite. Skyrim has a habit of giving its diseases extremely literal names, and all the symptoms of gutworm point to having a worm in your guts, so there's no way this disease can be anything but a helminth. So how do we rationalize getting a foodborne illness from what's essentially an ape attack? By burying the lead, of course. Most helminths get in your body through the consumption of their eggs, but that's not the only way. These worms' eggs can survive on certain surfaces, such as fur or skin, for weeks at a time, leading to an infection if you were to touch your mouth after touching a contaminated surface. Additionally, hookworms can enter through your skin if you were to walk barefoot on contaminated soil, so sometimes you don't even need to accidentally eat the eggs for them to end up inside you. Now we have proof these worms can get in your body through just skin contact, but how are they ending up on trolls? Helminths spread their eggs by planting them in the, to put it politely, outgoing traffic of your intestines. Anything that touches the big brown biohazard, such as the now-soiled soil, or in gutworm's case, a magical three-fingered primate, is now a carrier of contamination. Trolls are located all across Skyrim, but the locations with a consistent troll population are usually covered in bones and debris. Besides being good environmental storytelling, these messy habitats show that trolls are not at all hygienic, and it's not outrageous to think these ape-like creatures don't clean up after themselves and are picking their butts and rolling around in poop. I mean, come on, throwing poop is like the second most popular ape stereotype. I'm also curious to know if the troll's ability to quickly regenerate makes them prime hosts for the parasites, but that's diving too deep into speculative evolution for a topic I've dumped too much time into already. Trolls are covered in poop worms and spread it to you Dirty Sanchez style. End of story. Green spore is a disease you can only catch from slaughterfish, the carnivorous fish we originally talked about in the ataxia section of the last video. Green spore's effects are interesting as it's the only disease to affect your intimidation and persuasion skills, both of which it lowers by 25%. I find this intriguing because while most diseases affect your combat, magic, stamina, or other physical characteristics, this is the only one that affects your speech in any capacity. This means the disease we're looking for is likely a green, spore-bearing plant or fungus that sticks itself to a slaughterfish and somehow affects the player's ability to communicate. At this point, I'd like to remind everyone that through Gutworm, we proved that in Skyrim, traditionally foodborne illnesses don't have to be spread through ingesting them. If whatever we diagnose this as turns out to only be harmful if you eat it, that's good enough for Skyrim, so it's good enough for me. Anyways, there's a few initial candidates I thought green spore could be. Fungi like saprolegnia growing on fish is a common ailment, but they're neither green nor harmful to humans, so that rules them out as a suspect. Most kinds of algae are well known for being green and reproduce via different types of spores, but aren't harmful to humans, unless there's an algae bloom. An algae bloom is an excessive growth of algae caused by excessive nutrients and warm water temperatures. These blooms are either benign or harmful, with the harmful variant harboring toxic species of algae like cyanobacteria. The toxins of cyanobacteria have a heaping helping of terrible side effects when ingested. These can range from a standard fever, vomiting, and headaches to the more unique and relevant symptoms of salivation, drowsiness, and oh, what's this? Speech disturbances? Just like what green spore does to your persuasion and intimidation? What a coincidence! Before I stamp this diagnosis with my seal of approval, I want to take a minute and play Daedra's advocate. The source of green spore should be some kind of spore, unlike cyanobacteria who reproduce via cellular fission. Well, they do use things like endospores to reproduce, but that's a whole different can of worms I'm not going to dive into right now. I'm already faking being a disease expert. I don't want to add fake microbiologist to that list anytime soon. What I believe to be true with green spore is that the doctors of Skyrim don't yet know there's a difference between algae and cyanobacteria within an algae bloom. Excluding what the Dwemer have done, the general technology level of Skyrim is somewhere around the Middle Ages, and we didn't discover bacteria existed in reality until well after that time period. Shout out to my boy Anton Leeuwenhoek, by the way. One day, the name of green spore might change to more accurately reflect where it comes from, but for now, I'm saying green spore is cyanobacteria poisoning and moving on. And with that, we've officially diagnosed every curable disease, and then some, in Skyrim. However, in my last video, I had it pointed out to me that I made an entire video on the diseases of Skyrim while completely ignoring the one Skyrim quest about diseases and the mysterious affliction at its center. So what is this mysterious final affliction? Exactly that, the affliction. In the Daedric quest, The Only Cure, you interact with the Daedric Lord of Disease, Peryite, and their rogue cult that calls themselves the Afflicted. Each of these cult members has this affliction that's not like any of the other diseases in-game. It seemingly has no cure, source, or negative side effects whatsoever. The only real side effect we have to go off of is the affliction gives you an ability called Vile Vapor, a poisonous projectile puke that's mechanically the same as the Dragonborn's shouts, just reskinned and desanitized. All we know about the affliction is it has something to do with Peryite, only the crazy cultists have it, and they're using it to attack their enemies with vomit. With such limited information, you'd think it'd be impossible for me to say what disease this is. And you're right, I won't say what disease it is, because it's not a disease at all. I know it sounds like an outlandish theory to say the disease god followers don't have an actual disease, but let me explain what happens on the quest so you can understand why I believe this. The quest starts with a player talking to Kesh, a non-afflicted follower of Periite that offers you a chance to commune with the deity if you go on his fetch quest for incense ingredients. The ingredients are a flawless ruby, silver ingot, vampire dust, and death bell, which once mixed create a noxious green goo that allows you to communicate with Periite. The first three ingredients are all related to purity or curing diseases in one way or another. Vampire dust has cure disease as one of its alchemical properties. Rubies symbolically represent life force and vitality according to the crystal girls I asked about this. And silver has been used as a purifying agent in both ancient folklore and modern medicine. Death bell, the last ingredient, is a plant unique to Skyrim with only poisonous side effects. It's a symbol of, you guessed it, death, that fits with the theming of Periite being a bringer of plagues, as pestilence and death tend to be overlapping godly domains. All these ingredients are thrown into a pot to make a caustic slime that lets the player hallucinate visions of Periite after inhaling the fumes. So what we have is a pot of intoxicating goo connected to the god of disease that's telling the player to kill his ex-followers that are spitting up a similarly colored green goo. What I think is going on are the afflicted are downing and regurgitating this green goo as a way of stealing power from Periite. And the combo of faking a disease and stealing his secret sauce pisses Periite off just enough that he offers the player a shiny new shield in exchange for sliming his cultists. The only hang-up I have with this theory is that because the vile vapor does poison damage to the player, it should also do poison damage to the afflicted since they're the ones drinking it. I have two guesses for why the goo doesn't also harm the afflicted. 1. Becoming a Periite cultist comes with a constitution buff that makes you a better carrier of diseases and also unintentionally makes you resist the goo's poison. Or 2, everything I said is wrong, and because Periite is portrayed as a dragon, he gives his followers a natural breath weapon of stomach acid. I'll let you take your pick on which one of those theories you like the best, because at the end of the day, that's what Skyrim's all about, making your own choices and deciding to do what you like best in a world made just for you. When I play, I choose to overanalyze and research minute details like diseases, so what's stopping you from playing in your own unique way? Want to do your own diagnosing? Go for it. Want to do your 13th Stealth Archer build in a row? Hell yeah! You want to do an in-depth study on Charis because they're your favorite creature in all of Skyrim? Get away from me.